Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Pajama Talk. This is our winter season in 2020, and this is episode 5. Today, we're going to talk about a topic. It's about death. And the Pajama Talk is really all about making life easy and enjoyable, and yet meaningful and purposeful. So when we look around the world today, there are so many things is uneasy for us. And the number one on the list probably is death. And we all celebrate birth, but we grieve for death. We all love to experience heaven, but no one wants to experience death. And we spend almost all our life to be safe and avoid death. And that's become such a taboo and something that we try to avoid talking in our own personal life. But look around every day, our TV and news media everywhere are using death as a measurement of how bad things are. So death really is such a bad thing, and we can fall into deep grief and unease of our life around it. And nothing hurts us more than seeing our loved ones, our spouse, our children departing from this world before us. And that's the biggest unease, biggest, grief in today's world. And today I am so lucky to have two wonderful guests to come and join the conversation to talk about death and how can we ease our life by ease ourselves around death. So let me welcome Pat and Michelle to our talk. Let me introduce them a little bit. So Pat, Patricia Shivland is a registered nurse and certified life coach. And she told me her soul purpose, the soul spelled S-O-U-L, soul purpose is to be a light for those who mourn and in the darkness, and helping them find peace and purpose as they move forward in their grief. And welcome, Patricia.
Thank you.
And then I want to welcome Michelle Hoffman. And Michelle is the founder of the website called thewidowguide.com. And Michelle is an international best-selling author and speaker and coach through grief. And she really wants to also bring light to widowhood. Michelle empowers parents who have lost a spouse, and she helped them to figure out how to parent alone and have the dream of their own. And there's more to life than just being the one who didn't die, right? And those are so beautiful. And Pat is also the author of the book called How Do I Survive? 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss. And Michelle's book is about life worth living, a practical and compassionate guide to navigating widowhood and soul parenting. And I'm so blessed to have both of you come to talk about our today's topic about death.
Thank you very much for having us, Shumei.
Yep, thank you, Shumei.
Welcome, and I really appreciate your contributing to this topic. So first question I want to ask Michelle. So according to your own experience and the people you help, what are the top 3 challenges as a widow?
As a widow, the top 3 challenges are understanding grief and how it's complicated and ambiguous. And when you're trying to get something done, grief will slam your head against the kitchen wall and throw you to the floor and put its foot on your neck and prevent you from breathing or seeing the future. So the first most important thing about learning how to move through grief and loss, particularly on becoming a widow, is figuring out what is this grief monster doing and what does it mean to you when it's roaming the house at night, smothering the children, and how are you going to grasp a little bit of air to figure out how to make decisions when you're going through the grieving process. And what does grief hold for you that is such a treasure that you don't want to let go of grief? And when you can invite grief in to sit at the kitchen table and have a cup of tea with you and really figure out what are you treasuring by holding so tightly onto this? And when you can honor that, then grief will actually help move you forward. So when you can figure out what grief holds for you and how to honor that and how to begin to create your own life, that would be the first biggest step.
Yeah, I love what you just said. You know, there's two things just strike me is this feeling of suffocating and has no ear. And that's how heavy the people is experiencing the grief. And I love, you know, what you just said, like inviting grief as a friend sitting on the kitchen table, just have a conversation with it. And that, you know, just by listening to you, it totally switched it, and I felt the heaviness just gets lifted. And that's so, so beautiful. And I want to ask Pat as well the same question. So you have experienced your own life and as a child, and you worked with people who lose their child. What are your or their the top three challenge around that?
Well, you kept talking about air and breath, Michelle did, and that's the first challenge is we forget to breathe when we are so sad and we are in the midst of grief. We forget to breathe. We may inhale and then we hold it and we forget to exhale. And so that very breath is just impacting our lungs and everything about us. So that's one of the first challenges is relearning how to breathe, something that is so natural for us from the time that we're born. We have to relearn how to do it consciously to be able to allow that energy to move through. Another challenge that it is everybody grieves differently. So when I'm a mom and my husband is grieving or my children are grieving, there's layered grief going on in the home. And so as a parent, you're grieving not only for your own loss and your devastation, but also for your children and for your spouse. And so that's a very challenging time because everybody's going to go through the grief journey at a little different pace or hold it a little differently. So that can be very challenging. And one of the biggest things, especially for grieving moms, is what's my purpose now? What's my purpose now that my child is not here? That was my purpose. Being a mom and loving this child so much, and now they're not here. What's my future look like? And so very similar to what Michelle has said too, but those are kind of the top three that show up.
Yeah, it's just so wonderful. And both of you mentioned the air, the breath. And we hold our breath whenever we're under stress. And, you know, losing a spouse, losing a child is really the heaviest moment and seize our breath. And I remember like a Chinese old philosophy was talking about is life, the liveliness is really in our breath, in and out. In the moment we're breathe in and breathe out, that's our life. And if we're holding it, our life stops, as if we want to experience the death with our loved one. We want to stop our own life by holding the breath and stop the liveliness continue to go through us, the life source going through us. And that's so beautiful to remind people just coming back to your life. even though your loved one, ceased living in this world, doesn't mean you have to go alone. And touching back to the purpose, and as parents, really, really in my life, now I find, purpose beyond my children, but for a long, long period, it was my life purpose. Like if my children is not there, a lot of moms, especially moms, and they suddenly feel empty. That's what empty nest is, right? Your children doesn't have to be gone. They just leave for college. You suddenly feel their lives become empty. But at least they will come back from time to time. Now, if they really passed away and you feel you lost your purpose as if forever, and that is like such a big challenge, and really to the key issue of grief and how to live on. But I guess losing a spouse is a little bit different, right, in terms of purpose. Michelle, do you have anything on
And
that?
what you're talking about is universal to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
When you're saying you're taking in a breath and you're holding it instead of continuing on with that life, it's that moment in between. And we go through these transitions of breathing in, breathing out. We go through transitions of being infants, of being toddlers, of being children, of going through puberty. That's a big role change. When we become young adults and we become independent, these are all major life role changes. And it feels to me exactly what you were saying is in between each one, we hold our breath and go, I've just had a major role change. And you can't imagine what life is before you accept and partner with someone until you do it and have that journey together. And you can't imagine what life would be like once you have children, before you have children. You can try, but it's a very different reality when you're in the actual role. And to your point, it's a major life role change again when you move communities, when you change jobs, and when we lose someone we love so dearly. It's a life change, a major life role change that we don't anticipate. And so we hold our breath, as you're saying, because we want to hold on to who we used to be, because we understood that identity. And now it's a matter of looking for support and guide and teachers and making these big life decisions to exhale and decide to be a new identity and accept that you are someone new. And then embracing that and creating a life worth living is a whole new journey. Just like puberty and coupling and inviting people into the world and losing them are all new identities. And what's going to be the legacy that you leave? What is your impact on the world?
So that's a big, like you said, big shift to a different phase or different way of living. Suddenly, a little different than losing a child. You're losing your purpose, losing a husband or wife, and suddenly half of your words like disappeared, right?
Right.
And you feel like not complete. You had a partner, everyone's supporting each other. Suddenly that part collapsed, and then your world is split in half, and you don't feel the wholeness. And so I'm so glad both of you come, and these are very different aspects after losing a loved one. So so for Pat, you mentioned to me before that there is like a healthy grief, and I assume there's an unhealthy part of grief. And like you said, breathing, I assume like you stop holding the breath will be the unhealthy way of breathe. Also, losing the purpose is the emptiness, feel empty, and you know, just like Michelle said, you probably without a purpose, you probably having a life not worth living, because it's meaningless for to continue. Kind of, I guess that would be the unhealthy type of grief. So what would be the healthy grief? What would be, how do you switch to that?
Oh, very good question. And I actually kind of call it failed grief when it doesn't work, because I've had many loved ones and friends and people that I know that have never been able, they became grief and it pretty much ended their life either physically or emotionally for the rest of their life. So the healthy things are what I talk about in my book too, is, it's like we said, learning how to breathe, understanding who you are today compared to who you were before your child died, your loved one died, because you've changed. And so it's understanding who are you now, because that purpose and all of those things have changed. The one big thing that I talk about is finding your tribe. And in today's world, we'll use the term tribe as kind of a cutesy way where all us girlfriends get together, maybe have a glass of wine and some hors d'oeuvres or something, and we kind of hang out. But what I have found is finding 2 to 3 people that are your lifelines. And they may not be your family members. Sometimes we lean into and onto our family members, but they can't be there in that same way because they're grieving also. So finding the 2 to 3 people that are your lifelines, that they'll take the rope and wrap it around their waist and wrap it around yours, so that when you're ready to fall off that cliff and into that precipice of grief, they can reel you back in and hold you back up. And they're willing to wipe the snot off your face. They're willing to do whatever it takes to be there in the way that works for you. And as you're taking your steps forward, they're there to encourage, to love unconditionally, and help you move forward. So that's really huge. And the big thing is finding that renewed purpose. What is that going to look like? And statistically, and in all the people that I've worked with and historians of stories, when we find a purpose in our grief and we use that grief to propel us to make a difference in other people's lives, that's what heals. That's what heals us, is by contributing to others, because we get out of ourselves and then we start giving to others in a way that's very meaningful. And then that refills our heart, because what happens in grief is we have all this love in our heart and we don't know how to give it now, because that person that we gave so much that love to is not there. So it's different. And so if we can use that love to help others, is the healing source of energy.
That is so beautiful. So first, to switch from an unhealthy grief to from like a healthy or a better way of grieving, is to remember to breathe, and then you find the right community that who can support you, not the one that who are also grieving with you at the same time, but someone can provide a better support around that. And then I love the last one, is to really find your purpose, so that your love to your loved one can continue have an outsource to somewhere else that you can love. And otherwise your love is stuffed inside you and cannot flow through. It will not feel right, and will not help. That is so beautiful. So I want to touch one thing, is the key is finding the right support. And a lot of people who are grieving or have, stuck in life, and there are a lot of people around, their family and relative, and they want to help, they want to support, but they may not be the right person to give the right advice and support. Sometimes they could, get even worse. So Michelle, do you have any experience on that, how to advise people to find the right support?
So I call this an inspirational advisory board. It's very similar to what Pat's talking about. And again, once you've suddenly been put in the position of head of household, there are a lot of things that you're responsible for that you used to partner with when you've lost a spouse. And so what I say is to create this inspirational advisory board, and this is made up of subject matter experts. And these are going to be the people who you go to help ensure that you don't lose your fiscal and financial life. These are the people who are the trusted mentors who have your best interest in mind and will help you get things done. They're the teachers. They're the mechanic. They're the advisors. These are the people also that you need to realize that you can't get milk from the Comcast guy. So in addition to understanding that they will offer and share their knowledge, experience, and expertise with you, but also realize how much they can't offer. So know that when you go to the bank, the person you're speaking with can represent that financial institution, but don't be asking medical advice of the banker. So it's almost becomes a ninja skill. I'm using, wide examples, but that's a reality. Then there's also the emotional champions. And there are two types of emotional champions. And it's so valuable, like Pat was saying, to have someone who can help you bounce from a grief spiral, I call it. And these are the people who will say, you're right, no matter what. And it's so great to have a shoulder to rely on to say, you're always right. The whole world is wrong. You're right. Unconditionally love you. Then there are the emotional champions who will be like, yeah, that's rough. That's hard. I can ally with you on that. And then put the reality up in your face and go and challenge you and go, really, that's not really the only way this could roll. So consider another option. And, again, it's sometimes I want to go to my emotional champions who will just agree with me. And then I'll go to the ones who will actually put me straight. And I know who's who. And then there are the accountability and network partners. And these are the people who are going to help you get the logistics done. They're going to help you put surrogates in place so that your children don't get involved in risky and dangerous behaviors. They're going to help you sole parent and make sure that your children are good people. So those could be the teachers and principals. They could be the person who's taking your child to the father-daughter dance. They could be a Girl Scout leader, a Boy Scout leader. These are also the people who are looking out for you when you're busy taking care of everyone and everything. These are the people who are going to help make sure that your health is in order and that you're setting a good role model for your children and that you're being luminous and you're finding fun and recreation. And when you're ready, and it's never soon enough, to move on and allow love to come back into your life, to act as a partner again. So this is building the inspirational advisory board.
I love that idea. Just having your own advisory board in life. It's a great idea, not just for grieving, like almost anything, like a big in your life. If you have a supporting advisory board, not just random anyone, like you go to your mom, you probably get all the advice on everything, but that's not probably the expertise, right, goes. So you really want to find the right person and know what you need. I love what you said. Like, sometimes I just need someone to encourage me, say I'm doing everything right, the whole world is wrong. Even though it's not totally true, but sometimes you just want to hear that. But sometimes when you know at the end, you need to challenge yourself to move on, to get, out, and being uncomfortable, be able to breathe and step out, and then you get more beyond that. So I just love this idea. So going back to Pat, do you have what's the most exciting moment for your own experience or your client's experience is that when they practice what you coach them, they eventually get out of the grief and suddenly life opens up. And can you share any exciting moments like that for us?
Well, I've been working with a couple recently, and mom, their son had died. He was 22 years old, and died by suicide. Very tragic. And so we've been working together and reframing things and figuring out what, they can do as a couple and individually. And she told me a couple weeks ago, she said, I used to wake up just crying. I would literally wake up from a dead sleep and be crying without even thinking. And she said, now I wake up and she's ready to get up and she's ready to go out and listen to the birds. And she's thinking about how she can use her son's medical situation to change it for other and for pediatric physicians and diabetes awareness. And she just shines. And so her light just shines out of her face. And that's just within 8 weeks. I mean, it was just amazing that she went from pretty much sobbing every time we talked, but she needed to do that. And she talks about that was so important to be in that safe space and being vulnerable, but then to be able to take the action. And now when she talks, she's lit up. She's totally lit up and she's energized and ready to step forward into her second half of life. And that's what it's all about. It's truly what it's all about.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I have chills over me when, hearing this story. And it was such a saddened life experience. But when she found her purpose, everything changed, everything lights up. So,
Yeah.
Michelle, do you have any similar experience in your own life or in your client's life?
Oh my God, I so love my clients. It's so exciting and gratifying to hear stories from my clients. And I'll give you like a couple of quick touch points that are wins. I've got clients all over the world, which is also very fun. And one of them, her late husband was the alpha in the family, and she's got these two gorgeous children. And she really didn't know how to parent them. So we worked on all of these skills for her to be the sole parent and for their relationship to come together. And a couple of like really quick, easy ones. We would play a game called Sad, Mad, Glad. And this was a way for her children to connect with her and talk about their feelings and get used to expressing their feelings, wants, and desires with their mother. And she then would do it too, and it would be a way for her to role model her values and what was important to them. There's another really great one with kids. When they're a little bit older, I invite the parents to ask, would you like me to listen, guide, or help? And that gives the child a little bit of control in an out of control situation. And also it reminds them that this is someone who will respect what I really need. And then the hard part as the parent is to really do what they're asking of you. Inevitably, they'll say, listen. And then when they realize they're at a certain point in their situation, they'll say, okay, guide. And then you're like, I get to guide. And if they really need help, they'll ask for help. But if you just hold, to whichever they're choosing, it means that as they grow up and become independent, they will also know that they can come back to you to listen, guide, or help. I've got a widower who we helped actually figure out what his true calling is and his profession. So he changed his career, revenue, resources. He's an amazing parent to his daughter now. He feels like the provider that he really wanted to be for her once he was able to move through grief and rebuild in that way. And we're also working on chapter 2 for him. So he's now dating, which is also a really exciting process.
That's such a
good highlights. I love them all. They're so exciting.
Huge. And that's huge. I just learned from what I can do with my children, even, without grief. And that's so fundamental is when we're under stress or in a grief moment, we all got our feelings mixed up and we don't know what we really want. And understanding what our emotion is all about and putting into categories is such a fundamental moment to change, because then you're clear what you want, whether you want just someone listen to you,
right,
and understanding you, or you want a guidance or a support and help. And that's so brilliant, because when you're in deep grief, these are all mixed up,
Yeah.
right? And if you don't know what you want, you cannot ask for any help the right way. Just like you want to assemble your advisory board, but you don't know what to ask for. You want to ask for house, then go to the house people. You want to ask for finance, you go to the house finance people. But if you don't, then you don't have a advice from anywhere.
It's a
So
super stealthy ninja strategy skill to understand what is somebody's bounty? What do they have plenty of? So people want to help and they say, how can I help you? And you're like, I'm so in my emotional brain, I can't think logically to know what to ask of you. But when you can, and if it's somebody who has resource, they may be able to, a gift card or a connection or something like that.
that really opens up everything in your
Right.
life.
Who has a lemon tree? They can give you lemons. That's their bounty.
Yeah.
If they have time to walk your dog, they can walk the dog. But you have to really be clever
Yeah.
in making sure that you see what their bounty is. And that's brought me to, I say to the kids, take what you need, not more than what you need. Give what you can, not more than what you have. So it's a matter of finding someone's bounty so that you're not taking advantage of something that they don't have. It's if you have a bounty of that, if there's a lemon tree, there's too many lemons. Lemons would be great. So that's my example. It's a metaphor, of course, but
Yeah, I love that. So, Pat, going back to you, so after all these experience in your own life and in your clients' lives, so what do you see as things change, like before and after they're losing their loved one around death, their concept about death, their belief around death, how do they change before and after they lose their loved one, and how just working with a professional coach will make any difference on this switch?
Well, when they first look at death, it's so overwhelming, and they can't see the forest through the trees. And a lot of times people will lose their faith and not have the hope because it's just everything is so dark and dense around them. And so working with a professional, working with a coach, or working with a therapist, we're able to help them reframe some of these things. Like even with my own mother, I worked with her when she was in her late 80s because my brother had died and she had buried all that grief. And when I was able to reframe what all happened at the time of his death, that people weren't abandoning her, truly, that was her perception, that she didn't do anything to cause him harm, all that guilt and all that anger and that abandonment just lifted away so that she could then find true joy. Today, I was telling my husband the other day, I said, I never knew my mom to smile a genuine smile because she was so engulfed in grief in her whole life. And since we did a lot of these exercises a few years ago, she looks across the table now at my granddaughter, her great granddaughter, and she smiles the biggest, truly radiant smile that I never saw in this woman who's now in her 90s. That's the change. And I believe in having faith, and it doesn't have to be a certain religious perspective, but having faith that there's more than just this life. And for the women, especially the women, men who really believe in that there's more than this life, and they start seeing signs and they open themselves up to seeing signs that remind them of their loved ones, that heals so quickly and easily. Like the clients I was just talking about, she hadn't really talked about signs, and now all of a sudden cardinals are starting to show up. And so for her, that's like, wow, that's a sign of my son. Or she had a little piece of paper that was from his insulin syringe package that ended up in a shoe that was bought long after his death. And she's like, wow, to me, that was a sign just saying, I'm here. So having that kind of a faith that there's more than just what's here in the black and white world that we live in actually brings that healing and changes so that you can have a smile on your face that's genuine and be able to move forward and find joy. And I've always, death doesn't need to be a dirty word. It's a part of life. It's a part of life, and it sucks. It's ugly. It's all of that. But grief is because we love so dearly. So if we can reopen our hearts again and allow that to open up and peel away those things that were keeping our heart fractured and unable to open fully, once we can work through those scenarios and work through the issues that are the guilt and the anger and the fear and all of that, and start reframing it, that's when it all opens up and life is worth living again. It's worth getting out of bed for and moving forward.
That's so beautiful. And that's really the key of how we make the meaning of death. And like you said before, your mom went through so many years of grief just because she believed the meaning of the loss of your brother is the abandonment, is the disconnect, and lost it forever. That and what is the belief right now of her? I know you mentioned that now she start to see signs, and that meaning to her is a sign of continuation of life or beyond death. Is that what her is arriving right now?
Yes, I mean, that wasn't my mother, but for my client who's starting to see it, it's like, he's still here with me. His energy is still here with me. It's not gone. We say, oh, they died and they lost this person, or they're gone. And once we realize and people open up to the possibility, I'm not saying you have to believe that, but gosh darn, it doesn't hurt. I mean, really, right? It doesn't hurt to have that faith.
That is so, I think you can get out of grief, but the ultimate healing comes from the feeling, and you don't have to force yourself to believe there's a life after death, but just getting energetically. I love your using the energy, just getting energetically feel that. And when things happening or have a sign there, really you can feel that. You don't have to have a language or scientific data to back it up, but it doesn't matter. At that moment, you can feel it, and that's the healing moment. So, Michelle, do you have any similar things?
Excuse me. You got me, Pat. There's more to life than just being the one who didn't die. And we, excuse me, we love so deeply. And the joy in life is as deep as the grief of loss. And that's really what makes life so intensely valuable. And as we realize the depth of relationships that we've had and how incredibly more vibrant our life is as a result of having them, that actually is what makes blue more blue and chocolate more chocolatey. I mean, it makes life so much more sensual and meaningful and worth living. And so I work with my clients to project manage and prioritize the most important things in life. We're taught how to acquire things in life. We're not taught how to let go. And so rather than infusing fear in all of death and that release, infuse love into all of that. Just like we infuse love into meeting or welcoming these people into the world and having all these life experiences, let's infuse the same type of love into that endpoint and the departing, and knowing that, like I said, there's more to life than just being the one who didn't die. And we will continue forward and have more experience and impact in the world.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. While you're talking about it, and I has this image as if before the life death events in those people's life, we're living life as if we are like watching a movie with low resolution. Like, it's everything's going on, you have color, but they're not as vibrant. And until you have this sudden event in your life, and when you get out of grief, like both of you described, the life suddenly become more vibrant. And now you're looking at watching a high resolution, crystal clear image of life. Everything is so colorful and vibrant and attracting and satisfying. And life not is only worth living, but is like so meaningful and satisfying than even before.
Right.
But in order to go there, you have to go through this big dip of experience. And in that sense, your loved one is serving you for that purpose. They go through this, and have you go through this is because then you can live a much brighter life. And because everything shifted after that, but you have to get over the grief in order to experience that. And that is such a beautiful thing. Your loved one is a big gift. In that sense, the death event is a huge gift for you to live a brighter life. And I love what Pat said, it's bringing the light to the darkness. And we all know darkness is not really existing. And the only real thing is light, and the light is love. And if you go into a room and you cannot turn on a switch, say, give me darkness. We only have a switch for light. And people fall into the darkness is because at that moment the light was turned off. And I appreciate so much of both of you. What you're serving, what you're doing is really helping people to turn on that light. And once that light turned on, and now we have like a dimmable one, right? And have a degree of light. And before, probably the death event happening in their life, they have a very dim light in their life. And the death event, the grief really turned everything off, and suddenly it's dark. But it is the darkness is calling for more light. And once working with you guys to shift it, and now you can turn on the light, and in full strength, now the dimness will turn on to the light that they never experienced it before. And that's really the gift of their loved ones through death. And just this just comes to me when listening to both of you thinking, and it's so grateful for both of you. And
can I just say, I just thank you, because the way that you expressed it and the gift of our loved ones' lives and the way that you expressed it is certainly something that I'm going to take forward with my clients, my family, myself, because we don't necessarily always look at it that way. And the death, their being with us, and the death actually is a great gift in the long run. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
What would we call that? The gift death brings would be what we would.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's very hard for anyone to see this gift when they're in the grief. They will see it only after, working with someone to get out of the grief. And I so appreciate it for both of you working in this. And that will bring so much light to our world, because our whole life, as I mentioned before, is all about avoiding death. Avoiding death, and that causes so much stress in our life and so much tension, and all our decisions and actions are coming from that avoiding death. But if we can see that a very different way, and all this intention, intenseness will be gone. And this will shift our mankind to a different level if we can relieve ourselves from the heaviness, from the stress, from the intenseness of our concept around death. And I love you both so much. And I want to ask one more question for both of you, is if you could offer one advice today to all the people who are mourning for the loss of their loved one. Every day is just not individual, from illness. Look around the world. We just have the coronavirus, and hundreds of thousand people died, and suddenly in weeks they lost their loved ones. And there are people still in wars, any chronic, diseases like cancer. Every day we're losing our loved ones. If you can give one advice, giving one light to their darkness today, what would be that?
The one thing that I would say is each of us come into this world with the ability to impact the world and make a difference. And at any capacity that you are in, there is something you can do to connect with the world around you to have a positive impact. And if it's even through grief and loss, it's finding out who are you and what are you capable of doing and what can you do. And that there's so much to life when you are open to the possibility and you're not stuck in between that inhale and exhale, as we were talking about earlier, or feeling in the darkness, or it's like feeling the difference between the darkness and the light. I think is you could substitute that inhale and exhale for the same thing. So to realize that creating a life worth living is the best gift you can give to yourself, your family, your loved ones, the world, the future generations, and it's also honoring those who have come before you. So to really create a life worth living is the best gift you can give. And one of the gifts that I can share with all of you today, listening to Shumei's Pajama Talk, is an opportunity to read the guide that I did not have. So I wrote it, Life Worth Living, a practical and compassionate guide to navigating widowhood and soul parenting. It's available on Amazon. But today, for your listeners, Shumei, you are welcome to go to thewidowguide.com, THEWIDOWGUIDE.com, and download my gifted copy to you to help be the guide that you can have to create a life worth living.
That is so beautiful. While I was just listening, this comes to me. If anyone is grieving the loss of your spouse, and if you go to Michelle's website, download the book, and I love the title. It's Life Worth Living. There you go. And I just feel the moment that if your loved one, your spouse, is somewhere in the non-physical and still loving you and paying attention to you, that would be the message they want you to take. Life worth living after I'm not physically around, but I'm still around. My energy is still around you. And that's the message, their spouse would love them to have. And that's so beautiful. I just love the title of your book. Thank you. Thank you so much for this offering. And I love Pat to, give us your advice.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, if you are grieving the death of your child or anybody that you love deeply, you are worth it. You are worth it to be able, as Michelle said, as Jamae talked about, to find a life worth living. That's what Michelle and I both work at, is to help people find that life that's worth living. So be kind to yourself and reach out to people. Find that tribe, find that advisory board. Take that first step, because I know it's scary. It's scary to be vulnerable and take that first step, but just do it, because you are so worth it. You absolutely are. And I'm going to agree with what Jamae said. Our loved ones would not be sitting across the table from us and telling us to live in that darkness, to give up our lives for them. They would be saying, come on, stand up, take a step forward. I'm here. I love you. Let's do this together, because their energy always surrounds you. So you are worth it. And I will do the same thing. I have, as Michelle has said, my book's on Amazon, but I would rather have you have it. Get it in your hands. So all you have to do is go to survivechildloss.com and download a book. It's easy as that, survivechildloss.com, and please take it. And I hope that you can find comfort. I hope that you can find your peace. And I truly believe that you can find this life worth living.
That's so beautiful. Like, you guys really brought my tears to me. Like, I really love both of your messages, and life worth living, and find your support in your life, find your community, and really work out of this darkness and find a much brighter life, and that your loved ones would love you to have at this moment. And I thought of my father, and gradually lost a Chinese tradition is we actually celebrate death as much as we celebrate birth. And we touched a little about today is about the continuation of life beyond death. And in the future, if anyone is interested, we're going to go even deeper in our future episode around the topic of death. Until we can be totally cool about death, can we live in peace and move on to the next phase of human experience on Earth? And this is the step we have to take, and we have to break through. So stay tuned, everyone, for more conversations about death in more depths in the future. And again, thank you, Michelle, thank you, Pat, for this wonderful conversation. If anyone is listening, if any of what we're talking about resonate with you, feel free to leave a comment below and reach out to Michelle or Pat and get those books and wonderful guidance for your life to really live a bright life, let light in, and walk out of your darkness. And thank you so much for everybody watching. And this will be the end of this episode, but we will come back for more and deeper. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jamae. Thank you, Michelle.
So.